In a recent study at the University of California, Berkeley, researchers found that when you tell a story, your audience's brain lights up in 1,000 different ways. It actually engages more parts of their brain than if they were just reading words. So stay tuned. Next on Moxie Talk, we are discussing how to use stories in your presentations, especially your on-camera presentations, for impact. Hey everyone, welcome to Moxie Talk. I'm Thea Fassbinder, and in this video, we help you share your voice, find your message, and lead with confidence. Now, we are doing an entire series on media training and media coaching. Today, we are talking about how to use stories in your on-camera presentations. Now, whether you are doing a YouTube video, you are being interviewed on television, you are in a client meeting, or you are leading a town hall to your team or company, stories are one of the best ways to make sure your presentation is memorable, that your message resonates, and most importantly, that it sells. And by sells, I mean influences, persuades, make sure that it resonates with your audience. This is what we do when we tell stories. Now, I did a video prior to this where I took a deep dive into everything story, from the neuroscience and the power of stories to how to break down the structure of your story. So in this video particularly, I'm going to go over briefly those things, but mostly how to tell stories for your on-camera presentations. In order to do this, it's so important that you actually begin with the end in mind. What do I mean by that? I know that sounds really strange, begin with the end in mind. Well, this makes sure that you're not just telling a story for story's sake, or that you're telling the wrong story to a client or an audience. You have to make sure that you tell the right story at the right time. And in order to do this, you need to begin with the end in mind, which means, what is the goal of this on-camera presentation? Are you being interviewed by the media so that they can give an interview? You're giving an interview about your new product. Are you giving a meeting to your team where you are introducing some new changes in the company? Are you meeting with a client who has objections to the price of your product? If you know the goal of telling that story, then you make sure you tell the right story. So really ask yourself, what is the goal? What is the goal of this particular presentation? So that will help dictate which story you need. And I oftentimes compare this to when I was in acting school. When I was in acting school, we learned that you have to have different monologues for different kinds of characters you're trying out for. Are you trying out for a Shakespearean drama or a modern comedy or a love story? And you have different monologues to show off different parts of your personality and show those people that you can play different kinds of characters. It is no difference with stories. You are going to end up with a bag of stories, and you decide which story to pull out depending on the situation and the goal. Once you've decided that goal, it's important to identify which kind of story will best suit that goal, will best influence this audience and help your message resonate. And there are 5 major categories for our stories. There's the story of me, right? That is your story. And oftentimes our story is the best way to influence an audience. But there's also the story of us. That's the story of your team, right? Or your company. That might be really important. Or do you want to tell the story of them, which could be another client or a customer or a patient? There's 2 more that are really important and maybe a little bit more heady. The story of an idea. Are you selling an idea? Are you inspiring and motivating with an idea? And last but not least, the story of why these results. Now, why these results is probably a little tricky to understand. That means if you are trying to tell a story so that somebody understands the results of what you are telling the story about, the results of your product, the results of your change, your solution, then why these results is the best kind of story to tell. Once you've begun and you've decided, I'm going to tell the story of us, for example, the next important part is your audience analysis. Now, we talked about audience analysis in the last video, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. But if you do not do your audience analysis, you will not bridge your story to that particular client. Let's say you're doing a YouTube video on frequently asked questions from your audience. If you don't know who your audience is, you are not going to give relevant answers. Let's say you are creating a presentation to your team and there's been some changes in the employees in the team. You've done some changes to people's positions. Some people are here, some people are not here. If you don't tell the right story to that team, it is not going to resonate. You are not going to have the buy-in you're looking for. So make sure to do your audience analysis so you can bridge this story to the larger topic and the larger audience. At Moxie, we call this landing the plane. You know, we've all had bumpy landings in a plane, right? This is what happens when you don't do your audience analysis. It's a clunky ending. It doesn't have a bridge. The audience doesn't know why you told it. There's no crossover. There's no takeaway. So make sure to do this really important step. Begin with the end in mind and then bridge the story. If you want to make sure your stories have impact and you are doing this on camera, you cannot weave a yarn the way you would in a 45-minute keynote. You don't have that kind of time, and you definitely don't have an audience that is going to sit for that long. So how long should your stories be? I'm going to say anywhere from 30 seconds, yes, 30 seconds, to 2 minutes. Anything longer than that, you're really going to lose your audience. If you're giving a more formal kind of presentation, maybe it's a recorded video, it's okay to start your story and then end it later. It's okay to tell that story even out of order, but you want to make sure that you are not telling that story for longer than 2 minutes, just long enough to help your message stick with that audience. Let's talk about a couple pointers to make sure you're also delivering that story on camera with impact. So we've talked a little bit about how to tell that story on camera. And again, for a deep dive on story structure, check out my video prior to this on storytelling techniques for TED Talks. Now let's talk a little bit about making sure when you tell this story on camera, you're delivering it with impact. So here's a few pointers. Here's a few pro tips to make sure you are giving as much impact as possible with that story. The first is to make sure you tell your story from the present. Even if it happened in the past, tell it from the present. This will make sure it is active. It will engage your audience in a way. It is happening now to them in the room. Make sure that you tell it in the present. Also, when you practice your story, and you should practice, even if it's for an interview, make sure to pause. Build in pauses and build in places to emphasize words. We call this lessening the processing zone for your audience. Make sure they understand the story. They're with you while you're telling it. They are sticking with you while you're, in the height of the story. And you do this by adding in pauses and adding in emphasis. Now, more important than anything else when you're delivering your story is eye contact. I know none of us still to this day know where to look when we're doing these dang virtual presentations, but you want to look in the camera, people, the camera. So the camera on your computer is usually that little dot at the top. This is tricky when you're either looking at notes or you're using dual monitors or you're trying to look at team members and they're down and they're not in the camera. But looking straight into the camera like I'm doing now will make sure the audience thinks you are looking directly at them. So make eye contact, really important. I did another video on virtual presentation skills. You can check that out for more ideas on how to make sure you're presenting your story with impact. Last but not least, I would be remiss if I didn't give you this tip. If you're comfortable acting it out with your body, do it. I know for most of us and on camera, we are from here up or, sometimes even less than that. But if you can get your hands involved, if you can turn different directions to play the different characters, if you can, they're throwing a ball, if you can do some gestures in there, we call this creating your gesticular vocabulary, you are giving your audience a whole new set of things to look at, right? You're not just a talking head. They have action, you're acting it out with your body, and it's just the icing on the cake. So last but not least, remember, you have 7 seconds to a first impression, exactly 7. If you start out that investor pitch or that town hall or that one-on-one client meeting or a client objection with a story in the first 7 seconds, and you're starting it with impact and you're delivering it with confidence, you are sure to make sure that your audience is with you, they're resonating with your message, and you will sell them every time. Now, we've all been in a room where somebody's telling a story and you could hear a pin drop when that story was being heard. This is my goal for you, that the next time you tell a story, whether those audience members are on mute or not, that they are leaning in, that they are with you, that your message is resonating, and that you have influence. So if this video was helpful for you, make sure to like it and share it with a colleague that might benefit from some storytelling techniques for their next on-camera presentation. And also subscribe to our channel. We have dozens of videos on everything soup to nuts, from creating your presentation to delivering it both in person and on camera. And last but not least, if you're interested in learning more about Moxie Institute and our presentation skills training company, check out moxieinstitute.com. Take care, and we'll see you in the next video.